notebook. What am I talking about? Okay, now, here we go. I have first for you guys gone through and kind of outlined for you a protocol to follow, because the difficulty in the timed writing setting is that you have to do your reading skills and your writing skills in a pressure time period, right? Under pressure. So the first thing I want you guys to write down in your poetry section 5 of your notebooks is this protocol. I want you to title it Poetry Essay Protocol, just like I've done on the slide, okay? So I want you to actually go through and think about these steps that are required of you when you're actually trying to do a timed essay, okay? So first is to read the prompt carefully, of course, and watch for helpful hints about content, complexity, and technical elements. You guys, the prompts are going to always give you a guidance. Maybe it's the subject matter of the poem. So then you're going to think about what is the tone or attitude toward that subject matter, right? Maybe they're going to give you hints on what technical elements will exist in the poem while you're reading it, so that you can find the evidence of those, like alliteration or maybe personification, or of course always metaphor and then the smallest diction, right? Okay, so you want to think about that. And then also complexity, because sometimes you're going to be given a guideline or a hint about theme or a topic that talks about how this is a metaphor. So you might get like an idea of what the complexity of this poem might be in that prompt. So that's first step, right? We've always been practicing that first quarter. Your second step is to, of course, read the poem and determine the speaker and situation. So truly, to do a really good job of reading a poetry essay, or preparing for one for reading, you need to read through it and just figure out literal first, right? And a lot of times students then take that and transfer it into their actual introductions. So you kind of give a summary of speaker and situation as you lead into your claim. That's the deeper meaning, right? So we have to get the literal because we can't figure out what is the commentary about the literal until we know what the literal is. And then that's what the deeper meaning is, right? It's a commentary on that literal. Then the next thing is to read the poem and try to annotate as you go for noticeable elements, things that stand out, figurative language elements, rhyme or structural anomalies, and of course the words that have a lot of connotation associated with them. So that's your third step. So truly, to do it justice, a lot of times, especially if it's a short poem, you read through it twice. You read through it once to get an overview and an understanding of what's happening, and then you read through it twice to look for the elements that you need. But you guys will be able to internalize that and do it all at once as you practice additional essays, okay? Fourth is to organize your evidence or reread to find additional points to discuss. And then that might be through a coding system, or that might be through some sort of outline that you kind of give yourself, bullet points of what your paragraphs will look like. And most of you in your poetry essays we just got back practice the art of organizing by movement in the poem. So you started with how it started and then moved into a shift and then ended with this type of change in tone. And last is to go beyond the figurative language. My challenge to you will always be in poetry to try to incorporate structural or sound elements. And the goal for that is because that's what makes poetry different from the rest of your writing. Just in case I'm blind. Okay, and last is to write a specific detailed claim and organize body paragraphs. So if that's our protocol, that's the process of actually getting to writing. It highlights that not just your writing skills, but your thinking and organizational reading has to be in line before you can actually be successful, right? So this is all working up to the actual writing of your essay. That's a lot to think about. That's what makes these tasks more difficult. I would say the majority of you found success on your first poetry essay by following these types of protocols without even realizing you were probably doing it. So I'll leave that up for a second. know that you don't have to decipher any handwriting today in the next step of the process, okay? Our next goal is to develop our poetry success criteria. We did it together as a group with the pros, where we highlighted first the elements of a strong essay, and then you put them on those post-it notes, and we put them on our poster. That we still need to compile and summarize and give you back. But for the poetry, same idea. But instead of actually doing it all as a class collectively, you're going to work in a small group to individually look at some of the successful elements of an essay. So what I want you to do is you have 3 exemplar essays from the College Board. So I want you to kind of think about, you have your own essay rubric out, correct? That's why I had you take your essays out. I want you to think about what makes those essays successful, but I want you to narrow the focus of that for today. And the goal is to look at these 4 bullet points here, okay? So you're gonna look at the 3 essays. Now there's one that's low, so you can kind of differentiate what makes it lower if you need to. But what we're really looking at is what makes the other 2 higher scoring essays. Both of them were successful as far as getting higher scores. The first and the second one, you'll be able to tell immediately by looking at them, right? So you're gonna determine what makes it. Basically, I want you to find in the intros specifically, what are the elements that make a successful introduction? Because that's your first impression, right, for your essay. So then I want you to look at how is it organized? What's the organizational pattern of the top essay? And that's the middle one. And then how often are details cited as evidence? So look at for the frequency of citation in both those top essays. And then what are the other elements from the rubric or the top essays that help you? So I want you to determine one other thing that kind of makes the essay successful besides those 3 things that I've already highlighted for you as something I want you to pay attention to, okay? So I suggest working in a group of 2 or 3, and in your own notebook, you're gonna make a list that says poetry success criteria, and you guys can do it together, collectively have the same list. And I want you to list answers to these 3 or 4 questions, and be ready to share in about 5 minutes, okay? Or maybe 10, because it takes you a while to read, okay? All right.